Calla from Mission Citizen. So because of the coronavirus, we're not able to do in-person classes. So I'm just here today to talk you through Lesson 9 in case you would like to hear it out loud. So we went through all of the civics content in lessons 1 through 8. So lesson 9 is just going to be practicing for the citizenship exam. So we're just going to go ahead and get into it. So we're going to start as always. Oops, I shouldn't show that yet. We're going to start as always with the lesson 8 quiz. So if you're following along at home, feel free to look at that quiz. It's up on our website, missioncitizen.org, and you can find the quiz there, print it out, do it on your own. So if you're gonna do that, just pause the video real quick and get that done, and then I'm gonna move on to the answers. Okay, so I'll give you a minute to pause, and now I'm gonna go into the answers. Okay. So the lesson 8 quiz answer key. For question number 1, the Atlantic Ocean lies to the east of the United States. For question number 2, the Pacific Ocean lies to the west of the United States. For number 3, one of the 2 longest rivers in the U.S. is the Mississippi River or the Missouri River. So one of the misses, just gotta remember one. And then for question number 4, one state that borders Mexico is Arizona, California, New Mexico, or Texas. Whichever one you want to choose to remember. If you struggle to remember which are the Mexico states and which are the Canada states, I would recommend New Mexico on this one. You can't go wrong. Okay, so for question number 5, one U.S. state that borders Canada is Maine, Vermont, New Hampshire, New York, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, North Dakota, Montana, Idaho, Alaska, or Washington. Any of those states will work. Washington might be easy to remember because it's right above Oregon. Maybe Alaska because it's kind of not connected to the rest of the United States. Whatever you want to remember. And then for question number 6, the capital of the United States is Washington, D.C., also known as the District of Columbia. For number 7, the capital of Oregon is Salem. And for number 8, the Statue of Liberty is located in New York Harbor or Liberty Island. Okay, this is a long quiz, so we still have more. One U.S. territory is Puerto Rico, the U.S. Virgin Islands, American Samoa, the Northern Mariana Islands, and Guam. Any of those. And then this one you have lots of answers. So one Native American or American Indian tribe in the United States is Cherokee, Navajo, Sioux, Chippewa, Choctaw, Creek, Blackfeet, Seminole, Cheyenne, Mohegan, Oneida, Lakota, Crow, Teton, Hopi, Inuit, Iroquois, Huron, Pueblo, Apache, Arawak, or Shawnee. Any of those will work. And you might know of some other tribes, but these are the only federally recognized ones that will work as answers for this specific test for your interview. So make sure you get one of these. Okay, more questions. So for number 11, all men must register for the selective service at age 18 or between age 18 and 26. You can say either. And then for number 12, citizens have to be 18 years old or older to vote for president. For number 13, the last day you can file federal income tax forms is April 15th. Coming up. And then for number 14, the American flag has 13 stripes because there were 13 original colonies. And you can say that in different words, like the American flag has 13 stripes because they represent the original colonies. Any rephrasing of that will be fine. Okay, the American flag has 50 stars because there are 50 states. There's 1 star for each state. Each star represents a state. Any of those. We celebrate Independence Day on July 4th or the 4th of July, either way. And for question number 17, Two American federal holidays are New Year's Day, Martin Luther King Day, President's Day, Columbus Day, Thanksgiving, Christmas, Memorial Day, Independence Day, Labor Day, or Veterans Day. Any of those should work. Choose any two. Choose your favorite two. Okay, for number 18, the national anthem is called the Star-Spangled Banner. And for number 19, we show loyalty to the United States or the flag when we say the Pledge of Allegiance. Now, if you know the Pledge of Allegiance, that one should be pretty easy because it's just the first sentence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. Just got to remember that and you'll know the answer to question 19. Okay, so we've gone through all of the Lessons 8 quiz answers. So if you missed any, just feel free to go back in this video, pause it anywhere, just make sure you get all those down. And now we're going to move into the next part of our lesson, which is going to be a review of the naturalization process. So I know we talked about this a bit during our first class, but maybe you weren't here that class, maybe you still have questions. We're also going to cover some new information, so this should be hopefully helpful as some of you may have your interviews coming up. Okay, so this is just an overview of the process, and you've probably done some of these steps already. So the first one is determine if you're a US citizen. If you are taking these classes, you have probably determined that you aren't, and also determined that you are eligible to become a US citizen, just step number 2. So after you do those things, you're going to want to prepare the N400 application for naturalization. I'm sure many of you have gotten started on this form. It's basically just a lot of information you have to fill out, basically like information about yourself, in order to send in to the government to apply for naturalization. If you don't know where to find that form, you can find it at USCIS.gov. So just go to that website and you'll be able to print it out, or you can submit it online. And I believe there will be a link to that page of their website a little later in this lesson. So you're going to fill out that form and then you're going to submit it. Again, like I said, either online or through the mail, whichever you want. If you do it through the mail, you're going to have to pay the fee with a check. So if you would prefer to just put your card information online, you can do that. Either one you want to do. So then some time is going to pass after you submit your application, and eventually you will get called in for a biometrics appointment or a fingerprinting appointment. So they'll basically just get your fingerprints, get you in the system. You'll have to pay an $80 fee, and then you'll go home. You'll get called in for the interview, and you'll have to pay another, another $680, something like that. You'll have to pay the rest of the fee then, complete the interview. That's what we've been prepping for. It's going to involve the civics stuff we've learned and some English stuff, which we'll get into later in this lesson. And then after your interview, you'll receive a decision from USCIS on your application. You'll get that right away, right in person after your interview. And then if you receive basically a yes on your application for citizenship, then you will get a notice to take the oath of allegiance. You might do that right after your interview, or you might do it a little bit later. Scrolled ahead. And so you'll just basically say an oath pledging loyalty to the United States. It's just like a nice ceremony. You'll probably be with a lot of other immigrants who are gaining citizenship as well, and it's just kind of an introduction to citizenship. And you can invite family and whoever you want there for that. And then the last step, understand your rights and responsibilities as a U.S. citizen. So throughout our classes, we've been trying to make sure that we teach not only the content that you'll need to know for the civics test part of the interview, but also just information that will be helpful as a citizen. So hopefully going to our lessons has helped you with that step. Okay. So let's talk a little bit more about the naturalization interview. So the naturalization interview has 4 parts. First, there are interview questions in which your immigration officer will talk to you about your N-400 form and the answers you provided on that. So my recommendation for the interview questions part of your interview is just go over your N-400 before your interview date, just because there might be some things in your form that you forgot or that you didn't remember perfectly, like dates and things like that, dates you were traveling, that kind of information. And it's important that you know all these answers and are able to provide answers that are consistent with what you filled out on the form, just so the officer is confident that you filled out the form honestly and that you didn't lie about anything and that your story is consistent. So I would just recommend looking over your form before you get called in for your interview. And then you're going to have your civics test. So remember, the civics test is going to be out loud, and they're just going to answer civics questions that you've been studying for. Then there'll be an English reading test and an English writing test, also called dictation. So you're going to be, like I said, asked questions about your N-400 application, and throughout the conversation, your ability to speak, read, and write in English will be assessed. So basically, they'll just be checking to make sure that you are proficient in English, that you can understand and speak the language. And this doesn't apply if you qualify for certain exemptions, but for most people, you do need to demonstrate proficiency in English. And they're also going to test your knowledge of civics and US history. And it might be comforting for you to know that 90% of applicants pass both the English and civics tests. So after dedicating all the time you have dedicated to learning about civics in these classes, I am pretty confident that you all will be able to breeze through that. So let's talk a little more about the English test. So this is what we're going to be practicing briefly today. It consists of a speaking test in which your ability to speak English is going to be determined by a USCIS officer, and USCIS just stands for United States Customs and Immigration Services. So a USCIS officer will be asking you questions and determining if you can speak English. Then there will be a reading test in which you will be asked to read out loud at least one of 3 sentences about US civics and history correctly in order to demonstrate that you can read in English. So you have 3 chances. You can get 2 of those sentences wrong, but as long as you get that last one right, then you'll pass. And then there's also a writing test. So you have to write 1 out of 3 sentences about US civics and history correctly in order to demonstrate that you can also write in English. Again, you can get 2 of those sentences wrong as long as you get the 3rd one correctly, you write it correctly. And for these 2 English tests, it's not extremely strict. If you can write with some spelling errors and some grammatical errors as long as the meaning is understandable and correct. But different interviewers are going to be more or less harsh on the way that you read and write in English. So that can kind of vary, but for the most part, it is somewhat lenient and you have some room to make mistakes. Okay, so the civics test, this is what we are going to be practicing in our next lesson, lesson 10, and it's what we've been practicing in lessons 1 through 8, so you should be pretty well versed in this one. But you're going to be asked up to 10 civics questions out loud in English during your interview. So certain applications are permitted to take the test in their native language using an interpreter, and that has to do with age and how long you've been in the country. If you think you might qualify for that or would like to qualify for that, I would recommend that you check the USCIS website and see if you qualify for any of the exemptions. But otherwise, you'll have to do it in English. So the 10 questions are drawn from the list of 100 questions, 100 possible questions. At this point in our learning, we've studied all 100 possible questions, so you should be pretty well prepared for that. And you just need to answer 6 out of the 10 questions correctly. If you answer the first 6 right, you won't even be asked the last 4, most likely. You'll just be able to stop after 6. Okay. So now if we were in person, this is where I would stop to ask if anyone has questions about the process or the interview. But because we're not, I'm just going to tell you to feel free to send us an email at missioncitizen@gmail.com if you have a question, and we would love to answer it for you. You can also call us. I don't know our number off the top of my head, but you can find it at our website, missioncitizen.org. So yeah, feel free to ask any questions you might have. So now we're going to get into some English reading and writing practice. So because there is writing, you might want to get out a piece of paper for that part of it. So feel free to pause and do that if you need to, but otherwise I'll just keep moving forward. So with the English reading, so it's going to go something like this. You're going to be asked to read a sentence out loud. So you're going to be given a sentence to look at. So just look at this sentence and on your own, in your house, wherever you are, just read that sentence out loud. And then I'm going to give you a second to do that, and then I will read it out loud so you can check whether you feel that you said it accurately. Okay, now that you've had a second to say that sentence out loud, that was, who was the President of the United States? And now we're going to move on to the next sentence. So feel free to just say this out loud wherever you are. And this one was, George Washington is the father of our country. Okay, so the next sentence, same thing, say it out loud. And this last sentence was, Abraham Lincoln was the 16th President of the United States. So these are not official sentences, they're just ones that Mission Citizen came up with on our own, but they are on the theme that you will be asked to read sentences from, which is US History or Civics. So they should be sentences pretty similar to sentences you've seen over the past 8 weeks in our lessons. So if you have been able to speak and write those sentences, then you have a pretty good shot of doing well in the English reading and writing practice, or English reading and writing test portion of your interview. And also remember, you only need one of the 3. Okay, so now we're going to move on to English writing. So I'm going to read 3 sentences out loud. So make sure you have a piece of paper and a pen with you, because I'm going to ask you to write them down. So the first sentence, Thomas Jefferson was the 3rd President of the United States. Go ahead and write that one down. I'll say it again. Thomas Jefferson was the 3rd President of the United States. Okay, if you've got that one written down, it's going to look like this. And if you're in your interview and you want if you feel like you need to hear the sentence again, feel free to just ask your interviewer to do that. Worst case scenario, they say no. Best case scenario, you hear the sentence and can write it. Okay, so I'm going to move on to the next sentence. The Liberty Bell is in Philadelphia. So again, that's the Liberty Bell is in Philadelphia. And that sentence is going to look like this. So just double check that you had that all correct, that your spelling was accurate. And then our last sentence, United States citizens elect the president in November. Once again, that's United States citizens elect the president in November. Just write that down. And then the sentence you wrote should look something like this. Okay, so feel free to pause if you need to take more time to look at those sentences, but I'm just going to go ahead and move forward. And remember, again, you only need one of those sentences correct. Okay, so now that we've gotten through a lot of the practice we'll be doing for this lesson, I'm just going to get into showing you some helpful resources. So these are all links, so feel free to click on them if, oops, sorry, I've got a news notification. Feel free to click on them if you believe that whatever the link is to would be helpful to you. And they're all from the USCIS website, so they're all official information. You can absolutely trust all of this. So this is the N400 form I was talking about earlier. And then if you're a bit confused or have questions about how to fill out the form, then this is a link to instructions that USCIS provides. And then here's a document checklist. There's some documents you're going to have to provide, like passports and identification, things like that. So this is a checklist that you can look at to make sure that you have all of that identification. Next, we have fee waivers. So if it is a financial hardship or a financial burden for you to pay the high $725 fee for citizenship, then I would recommend you look at the eligibility guidelines for a fee waiver. So if you do find that based on these guidelines you qualify for a fee waiver, and if my memory is correct, the guidelines you have to qualify for certain government assistance programs or be at or below 150% of the poverty line. And you can find more information about that right here at this link, eligibility guidelines. But if you believe you might qualify, I would really recommend filling out an I-912 fee waiver request form right here. And here are the instructions for filling that out. And that could allow the government to cover part or all of your fee so that it is less of a burden. And of course, Mission Citizen provides scholarships that can help, but if you need a little extra help, this is a good resource to try. Okay, so now English resources. So we have just a link to some study materials if you're a bit nervous about the English portion of the interview and just want to brush up to make sure that you are able to do that. So here's a link to study materials, and then this is a list of common vocabulary you'll see on both the reading and writing sections that might be helpful because some of the words that will be used are not going to be the kinds of words that are most commonly used in sentences and in normal conversational English, just because it's all of the sentences have to do with U.S. history and civics. So if you don't know how to spell like Philadelphia per se, or a word like that, or government or something like that, it would be good to check out these vocabulary lists because they will cover the main words that you're going to need to know. Okay, and then also some civics resources. So we have a link to some study materials and to the list of 100 questions. You can find that list in different languages if that would be helpful to you on the USCIS website. And if you are a Spanish speaker, you can also translate the whole entire USCIS website into Spanish if that's helpful. You can find that on the upper right corner of the website. You'll see a pop-up. Okay, and also for civics resources, of course, we have all of our slideshows up on our website, so that is also a really good resource for you to use. Because the 100 questions will give you all the information you need, but sometimes it's helpful to have some context behind it to help you remember. So that's what our lessons hopefully will give you. Okay, and then I believe some of you saw this interview in class. At least I showed it at Gresham classes at least once, and this is a video of an example naturalization interview. So if you're feeling a little bit nervous or just would like to see what it looks like, this will be a good example of kind of the step-by-step process so you can know what to expect. And then you have most likely also heard this announcement about citizenship fees, but I just want to make sure everybody gets this. So the announcement is that the total cost of citizenship is currently $725, but the current presidential administration is proposing raising that cost up to $1,170. So that's a big increase. It's a lot more money. The change has not gone into effect yet, and it is possible that it won't actually ever go into effect, but there is a decent chance that in the coming months, or potentially year, the fees for becoming a citizen will increase. So if it is at all possible for you, I would recommend trying to submit your N-400 with the fee as soon as you possibly can so that you don't end up having to pay that higher fee. And this is a link, that's a link to an article you can find where you can find more information about the changes. Okay. And then this is information on next class. Unfortunately, due to the virus outbreak, we won't be able to have an in-person class next week like we haven't been able to this week. So we plan to have an immigration lawyer come to class to help you with your N-400, and we are still working on ways that we can still get you legal help without putting anybody's health at risk, which we of course don't want to do. So we are currently talking with the immigration lawyer about our options, and I will keep you updated over email if we come up with a solution on that one, but I'm very sorry that we aren't able to do that. I understand that that would have been very helpful for a lot of people, but unfortunately it's just not going to happen because we can't be putting people at risk. So that brings us to the end of lesson 9. Again, if we were in person, I would ask if you had any questions, but since we are not, just email them at missioncitizen@gmail.com. And we will get back to you as soon as possible. But thank you for joining me for Mission Citizen's first online virtual lesson. I will see you back here with lesson 10, and thank you for listening to this if you did listen to it. I appreciate your commitment and wishing you all the best with your interview and your test. Okay. Well, have a nice day and stay safe and healthy everyone.